Whenever you're ready. Thank you very much, Pedro. Over to you.
Fine, so hi. Thank
Hi.
you for coming. My name is Pedro Pablo Cardoso. I'm the instructor today. And following the sessions that we were conducting, we were going to continue talking about peak performance buoyancy. Talking about that and considering the new review, the knowledge review that we did last time, I have to say that you did brilliantly. Just some few things I need to highlight. On that, following on that trend, I would like you to talk. I would like to talk about some other experiences. For instance, I quite like cycling, and when I travel, I hide cycles wherever I go.
Mm-hmm.
But every time and you may think, well, a cycle is a cycle, a bicycle is a bicycle, it's not much to do. But what you have to do is every time you change the bicycle, you need to do some adjustment. You know?
Mm-hmm.
The height of the saddle, the height of the bar.
Mm-hmm.
Check if the bicycle is the correct one for the environment. If you are going to be cycling, you don't want to go mountain bike or downhill with a race bike. So these few considerations must be kept in mind. So it's exactly the same in diving. When you change the environment, you need to reassess your equipment, particularly your weight, and because it affects your buoyancy,
Yes.
which is directly related with the question. The question was, under which three circumstances you should conduct a buoyancy check before diving. So, what do you think that is important to know that, to keep that in mind?
Well, when you're diving, if you're quite positively buoyant, you're going to have a lot of trouble keeping down. So you'll probably use a lot of energy up, staying under if you keep on wanting to float up.
So it's related with the value. Why knowing this or being aware of this is important? Which is because every time you change your diving conditions, well, basically going back on the core of diving safe procedures, you always must have neutral buoyancy.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically, you will check your buoyancy when you change the configuration of your gear, when you expose yourself to different environments, diving environments, or when you spend quite a while without diving, because we gain reserves,
Yep.
yeah, or breathe dynamic change, and it affects our breathing. So when we are going to apply, I think that I answered already, but typically you apply that regardless the environment, if it's confined waters or open waters. If any of these three elements, you change your gear configuration, you expose yourself to a different diving environment, or you haven't dived for a while, you will do a buoyancy check. So if you please go to page number 19 in your handbook, you will find the answer and the long description of why do we do that, and when do we do that, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually the answer to the question as you find it in your knowledge review, the part one of it. And if you check there, basically the answer is this one that I already wrote in the whiteboard, which is you always check when you change your configuration. For instance, you use a thicker dry suit or a wetsuit,
Mm-hmm.
definitely will affect your float, your buoyancy. You will need to check that correctly. When you check your environment, for instance, you are diving here in the UK and you use very thick dry suit or wetsuit,
Yes.
sorry, but if you go to the Caribbean, you probably will not use a wetsuit at all. So therefore, you change the configuration of the equipment, and therefore you will need to reassess your buoyancy. Or when you haven't dived for a while, when we don't dive for a while and we don't do the things that we love, and we do some other things, you probably change the dynamic or the way how you breathe. Therefore, your breathing affects your variability, or you change your body mass, you add weight or you lose weight, and it will affect also your buoyancy. And one example of that, and very practical one, is when I arrived here to the UK 7 years ago, coming from Colombia to the Caribbean, when you almost dive naked,
Yeah.
and I was introduced to cold water, completely different environment.
Yeah.
So I started to use, it was completely different.
Yes.
And I was introduced not just to a complete brand new environment, but also new equipment. I was in need to use the dry suit. And the dry suit adds more air spaces,
Yep.
and it's a new challenge to you, so you need to reassess your buoyancy because you add extra equipment, which is sometimes, is, as in my case, it was completely new. um, So remember, you use that regardless where do you use where you dive. If it's confined water or open waters, every time, and I need to highlight that again. You change your configuration. You dive in a new environment. For instance, as in my case, is the ocean. The ocean is the ocean, but it was cold water and it was warm water. And if you haven't changed, you haven't dived for a while, which is also part of my experience. In my case, I just came here to study, and for many years, for a couple of years, I didn't dive. When I went back to dive, I checked my records. Oh, I used this many pounds to go down, but it didn't work because my body changed. I gained weight.
Yes.
Therefore, I became more buoyant. Therefore, I was in need to reassess my buoyancy and adjust equipment properly. And funny enough, that's something that is going to happen with us, with you particularly. Today we are going to go to the swimming pool. Chances are that in the swimming pool you will not use your dry suit. Therefore, you will use a particular configuration in your bell weight. And tomorrow we are going to dive here in the lagoon, which is cold water exposed to the environment. And chances are that you actually are going to use your dry suit, and because you change the configuration of your equipment, you will be need to readjust your bell weight and reassess your neutral buoyancy. So this is also related with some other sections. For instance, you can check the previous section of the handbook, the unit that we developed yesterday, for instance, where we were talking about how do we actually assess buoyancy. So remember, so this connects with previous knowledge that we went through already. And also it can be interesting if you want to explore specialities like dry sub specialty, because there you will be introduced to new equipment, which is going to give you the possibility to explore new environments. So therefore, in this, because you change this configuration and you change the environment, you will be need to reassess your buoyancy. And the way to do that, when you reassess your buoyancy, probably you will need to take in or out a weight from your weight system, and that's why I recommend some kind of belt like this, because it's very easy to reconfigure and very handy. Just a matter of put the belt, the new weights here in the pockets, and you can reconfigure your equipment very quickly if you want to check that. I will leave it here for you. So you probably may think that on get one of these instead of the normal BCD, because this is very easy to reconfigure, very flexible and quick to manage. Yeah. So just to summarize, I would like you then to remind you the question: under which circumstances, three circumstances, you conduct a buoyancy check before diving. If you remember the story of the bicycle, every time you go travel and you hire a new bicycle, I need to check that the configuration is the correct one for the environment in which I'm going to work. The same is with this case, or case of buoyancy. Every time we change the configuration, the environment, we need, or you stop diving for a while, you will need to reassess your buoyancy. And it's important because every time you go into the water, you need to guarantee that you have neutral buoyancy every time. So this is important. That and that applies regardless the environment in which you dive. Either is confined water or open waters. you always check neutral buoyancy. And if any of these three elements happen, you change configuration, you dive in a different environment, or you stop diving for a while, you will need to reassess your buoyancy. So the key points, and I highlight that, and I will repeat that again and again and again because it's very important, is remember, when you change your gear configuration, you add or take away some elements, you will need to reassess your buoyancy. When you dive in a different environment, you remember my example when I came here, cold water to
more clothing,
so
more
you
airspaces.
need in this one diving environment. You remember when I arrived to the UK, I come from the tropic, and here, you remember
Dry
what
suit.
happened? Dries, equipment there. And then when you stop diving for a while,
And you mentioned that you put on weight, so therefore you needed more weight because you had more buoyancy.
Precisely.
Same happens to everyone, I think.
Don't grow old. And remember that you probably will be interested on exploring more advanced training and other courses that are related with this, like the introduction to new gear configurations through the specialization on dry suit, because it provides you not just this one, introduction to a brand new configuration and new pieces of equipment, but also will allow you to dive in different environments, going to cold water. Any questions?
No, that's fine.
Good. All for today.
Okay. Well done, Pedro. You scored 26, which is a final score of 4.3. I really like the way that the level of knowledge you have is spot on. And your command of English is better than most English people's command of English. So well done there. I liked the way that the analogy you gave of cycling worked really well. That was one that everyone could understand. So that was a good way to bring people into the conversation. Just something to think about. These are tiny little specifics that will just make it a tiny bit better. That is to actually relate it more to the level of training. So you might want to say, as an open water diver, this is new to you, and therefore, this is why it's important. So just to try and make them feel as if it applies to them very specifically. And that's the tiniest thing. And that everything else throughout, the way you gave examples of the pool and the lagoon, the way you gave examples, you told people they're going to use it in open water. So that was fine, but a little bit more on the current level of training.
Okay.
So during this course, you will be doing that. You did very clearly tell them where and when they'd use it, which is important, because they leave with a memory saying, this is important because Pedro said we're going to use this tomorrow. So very good. So overall, 26, 4.3. Congratulations. Well
Thank you
done.
very much.
Passing score. Superb.